evening. You're watching ARIRANG News at 8. It's Thursday, December 19th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye. We begin this evening with the ongoing railway strike in the nation that has stretched into its 11th day. The union has launched another major protest rally, the second of its kind at Seoul Plaza in downtown Seoul, and it is ongoing as we speak. Our Kim Myung-gil is at the site and he's on the phone right now. Myung-gil, what can you tell us?
Well, Tian, an estimated 10,000 union members of Korea Railroad Corporation from all over the nation have descended upon Seoul Plaza in front of Seoul City Hall to hold a second mass rally. Since the protest began at 6 p.m. this evening, some 5,000 citizens have also joined in. Local representatives of Korail Union have taken to the main stage to state their opposition against the government's plan to establish a new rail operator, which they claim is a first step toward privatization. There is still very strong police presence outside Seoul Plaza, yet there haven't been any reports of clashes between them and protesters.
Right, Myung-gil, where does the union and Korail stand right now in resolving the dispute?
Yes, Chair, the government maintains that the strike is illegal and that state-owned rail operator is insisting that all striking workers return to their posts. More than 950, which is about 11% of the workforce, have crossed the picket lines and gone back to work so far. On Thursday, the police issued 25 arrest warrants for Korail Union members who are currently on strike, and one union leader has been arrested. Police have also raided 4 local union offices.
We've seen disruptions to freight and passenger trains. At what level were they running today?
Well, Jay, that is true. The strike has crippled railway services nationwide, hitting cargo train services the hardest. Freight rail operations are running at 39% of normal levels, and long-distance Korail services were down to 56% and 61% respectively.
All right, that was our Kim Myung-gil reporting live from Seoul Plaza, where a mass rally is being held by union workers of Korail. We'll check back with him in our later newscast. Now, taking you up north, a 4th round of inter-Korean discussions was held on the inter-Korean joint industrial complex in Kaesong, while a foreign delegation crossed the border for a tour around the factory park. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
The two Koreas met on Thursday for the first time since the North executed its second-in-command and key economic policymaker Chang Sung-taek last week. It's the 4th round of inter-Korean discussions on the management of their jointly run Kaesong industrial complex. On the agenda was easing the commute and custom procedures for South Korean workers crossing the border to the north, as well as allowing the use of the internet and mobile phones within the complex. Another key issue was attracting foreign investors. On the same day, North Korea welcomed a delegation of foreign officials from the Group of 20 nations to the joint business park. The South Korean government expects the tour to be the first step in globalizing the complex, which is regarded as the last remaining symbol of economic cooperation between the two Koreas. Experts say Thursday's inter-Korean talks and visit by the G20 delegation will offer a glimpse at North Korea's economic policy and where the joint factory zone stands after Chang's execution. As the country's key economic policymaker, Chang had been in charge of a handful of economic cooperation projects. Meanwhile, former NBA star Dennis Rodman left for Pyongyang for the 3rd time this year. Experts say if Rodman meets with his North Korean friend Kim Jong-un again, it will signal the regime remains stable, at least for now. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
The South Korean Defense Ministry has announced the interim results of its investigation into allegations that the military intervened in last year's presidential election. It turns out the military did post a massive number of political comments online, but was not aiming to influence the election. Our Han Da-gun explains.
After a 2-month investigation into the military's Cyber Warfare Command, the Defense Ministry announced Thursday that the unit posted some 15,000 political comments online. About 2,000 of the comments named specific political parties or politicians. The military explained, however, that the comments targeted North Korea and others seen as a threat to national security and were part of a larger strategy that was not aimed at influencing last year's presidential election. The head of the ministry's Central Investigation Command, Baek Nak-jong, said the comments were posted under the direction of the Cyber Command Chief, who ordered unit members to post strong comments online, including political claims on significant national security issues. Those include North Korea's sinking of the South Korean warship Cheonan and allegations that late President Roh Moo-hyun conceded the northern limit line during his 2007 summit with then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. Officials added the unit was not related to the National Intelligence Service in any way. The Cyber Command Chief has been stripped of his post, while 10 members of the unit have been indicted for posting more political comments than others. Immediately following the announcement, Democratic Party members of the Parliament's National Defense Committee released a statement saying the results of the probe are unacceptable and demanded an independent investigation into the case. The party claims that it was a target of the Cyber Command Unit's smear campaign and that it hurt their candidates' chances in last year's election. Pundits say the military has left room for controversy as questions remain about how the political comments they posted differ from an organized smear campaign. 한다은, 아리랑 뉴스.
And finally, an issue that lawmakers of all political stripes at the National Assembly can agree upon. They passed a resolution on Thursday that calls on Japan to stop its move towards collective self-defense. Lawmakers say the push threatens peace and stability in the region. Our Kim Hyun-ji reports.
In an all-member assembly session Thursday, lawmakers approved a resolution demanding Japan stop its push for collective self-defense, which would allow Tokyo to use force in the event an ally is attacked. The resolution says Tokyo's push for collective self-defense runs counter to its constitution that was adopted after World War II, which renounces war as a sovereign right and the use of force as a means of settling international disputes. It urges Japan to move away from efforts to deny or glorify its imperialistic past, and demands that Tokyo accept legal responsibility for the Korean victims of sexual slavery during World War II, and offer them due compensation. The resolution also calls on Japan to stop making false claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Islets. In the resolution, Korean lawmakers also demanded that the U.S. work with Japan to dispel Korea's worries, saying that Japan's denial of history and shift from years of pacifism disrupts the post-war international order. Washington has given Tokyo full support for its pursuit of collective self-defense, saying that Japan's endeavor can contribute to peace in Northeast Asia. However, tensions have ratcheted up in the region, following China's declaration of an air defense zone over the East China Sea late last month. On Tuesday, Japan's cabinet approved a new defense package that significantly boosts its military spending over the next 5 years, citing China's growing power in the region as a reason. Kim Hyun-ji, ARIRANG News.
One year ago today, President Park Geun-hye was celebrating her election victory. The Korean leader spent the day without much fanfare, but she did sit down with 77 leaders of small and medium-sized firms who traveled with her on recent overseas trips. She stressed that it has become an essential task for enterprises to enter the global market, promising business opportunities for them through diplomacy. She pointed out that if SMEs can create demand in overseas markets, it will help to establish fair business relations with conglomerates domestically. Throughout the week, President Park has been taking part in events focused on the economy and the people's livelihoods. For a breakdown of what we've seen over the past year since President Park's election victory and an assessment of her performance on political, economic, and foreign matters, we go one-on-one with Karl Friedhof, the program officer at the Kaesong Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you for joining us.
Always good to be here. Thank you.
Right. So let's start with President's approval rating. I believe you have the figure from yesterday.
Right. From yesterday, we had her approval rating at 54%. And, that's fairly strong considering that she's basically been under attack since she first took office. So we have the ongoing NIS scandal, the railway strike, which you've covered in this program already. And there's just been a series of missteps, some of them self-inflicted with her appointment process. But throughout the year, she's actually been in the mid-60s, and it's only in the past month or so where she's begun to slide off. This isn't that unusual, considering that most presidents are going to get kind of a honeymoon period. But what has been unusual, I think, is the fact that she's had so many problems and so many challenges, and it's almost like she's made of Teflon. Nothing seems to stick to her.
Well, speaking of challenges, it has indeed been a busy year for her. She had challenges both here in domestic and international affairs. You mentioned the approval rating in the mid-50s, but is there a gap between approval of her handling of domestic issues versus her handling of international affairs? Yeah,
there has been a gap on that. When we asked this question, I believe in mid-October, about 70% approved of her handling of international affairs, and I think that's not really surprising. She's been very visible, very out there, and kind of being, kind of a very good ambassador and a representative for Korea. But on domestic issues, her approval rating is at about 50%. Of course, this is some time ago, but my sense tells me is that if we ask this question again today, there would actually still be a considerable gap, and it may have even widened, considering that some of these protests and other issues are actually gaining steam.
Well, given those challenges, what has she been able to accomplish? What would you say is her key or outstanding achievements?
Well, internationally, she's done very well, as I just said. She's been a very good diplomat, kind of going around saying all the right things, meeting all the right people, and I think that's something that she's done very well. But domestically, it's really difficult to look back over the year and really point at anything that she's accomplished. And I can understand that she's had significant challenges, but also she's had some significant failures. There was a failure of a tax code reform, and so that really set her back, and she's having some trouble domestically.
So her first year has been a difficult one. What can we expect from her administration moving forward?
Moving forward, it's really difficult to say right now. She's taking kind of a static approach to all of these problems going on, and I'm not really sure where she's going to be able to go. She doesn't really have anything in the pipeline, and we're not hearing whispers kind of even from the background channels of what to expect. I think one of the challenges is really going to be is how does she prevent herself from ending up like her predecessor, Lee Myung-bak? Because right now, even though her support base is very strong, people in the 50s and 60s, for them the approval is still with above 70%. But she's already beginning to lose anyone 40 and below. So just today, or just yesterday, for the 40s, 30s, and 20s, all of them are now below 50%, and the 20s are actually at 30%, and they're falling quickly.
What would you say would be remaining challenges for the rest of her tenure?
Well, I think the one thing she's going to have to really do is she's going to have to figure out how to get this NIS scandal off the docket. Because without that, the Democratic Party, the main opposition party, is going to continue to beat her up on this. And so now we're really seeing this to start to take a hit. For a long time, it looked like it wasn't going to become an issue, but there are times in polling where one group can be out in front of an issue and the rest of the country may be behind, but over time, they may begin to catch up, and maybe that's what we're going to see.
North Korea?
North Korea is obviously going to be a challenge. I think she's running out. Her trust politic is now running out of steam as well. That was kind of her calling card coming in. Of course, she wrote the big foreign affairs article, and this is something I think that she wanted to be a legacy piece for her. But now, of course, trust politic only works if North Korea is willing to play nice, and it doesn't look like so far North Korea is willing to do that.
A lot of homework to do ahead. Thank you very much, Karl, for coming in today.
Thank you.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join ARIRANG's Yoo Ji-hye for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. ARIRANG News. Every weeknight, live on ARIRANG TV.
Meanwhile, over in the United States, a long-anticipated policy shift has been announced. The Fed is set to wind down its aggressive bond buying program starting in January on stronger economic conditions in the country. Park Ji-won has this report.
The Federal Reserve announced Wednesday that it will reduce its long-running bond purchasing program to $75 billion a month from previous $85 billion beginning next month. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke said the central bank's decision came as the U.S. economy shows strong signs of recovery.
Despite significant fiscal headwinds, the economy has been expanding at a moderate pace, and we expect that growth will pick up somewhat in coming quarters, helped by highly accommodative monetary policy and waning fiscal drag. The job market has continued to improve, with the unemployment rate having declined further.
He added the Fed will further taper the stimulus bond buying program next year if the economy continues to pick up. To minimize any possible blow on financial markets, the Fed kept its record low key interest rate near zero. This suggests the rate will stay near the bottom line longer than previously expected.
The committee also clarified its guidance on interest rates, emphasizing that the current near-zero range for the federal funds rate target likely will remain appropriate well past the time that the unemployment rate declines below 6.5%, especially if projected inflation continues to run below the committee's 2% longer-run goal.
The announcement comes a little over a month before Bernanke steps down from his post as Fed chairman. Bernanke said he closely consulted with the Fed's vice chair Janet Yellen, who's expected to be the next Fed chair, and she fully supported the decision. With the Fed's decisions on the stimulus and interest rates, both the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 finished at record highs Wednesday. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And for a detailed analysis of the effects of Fed's latest decision, our Hwang Ji-hye spoke with David Vines, professor of economics at the University of Oxford. Professor Vines says the tapering could result in unfortunate battles on the foreign exchange market.
The long-awaited taper has begun. And as David Vines, a professor at Oxford University, says, this is likely to reverse the trend of money flowing into emerging markets, particularly in Asia. He adds that the pace of tapering is under control.
It's going to go down very, very slowly, and it will be managed. So at its best, it will lead to a gradual outflow of funds and a small fall in currencies, and that's what you have to hope for.
Professor Vines says the real risk is cross-currency transactions that aren't well hedged, but that a simple fall in the currency can be a good thing.
This will help promote exports from East Asian economies, and that will be constructive for those economies.
Tighter liquidity in the U.S. will mean a stronger U.S. dollar and a weaker Japanese yen. So could that prompt a currency war in the coming months, given that Korea, China, and Japan compete in export markets?
It could. The hope is that they will all fall against the dollar somewhat, and that there's not too much imbalance in that fall. If there's a very rapid outflow from one particular one of the countries and that falls down, then that does create turbulence. And I wouldn't call it warfare, I would call it unfortunate battles.
Although the Fed's tapering of its bond-buying stimulus measures indicates a recovery in the U.S. economy, Professor Vines says the U.S. economy is still not at its full strength because investment figures haven't picked up. He went on to say that Asian economies, including Korea, should work on promoting more domestic expenditures that lead to longer-term development. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Amid concerns over possible negative impact the Fed's decision could have on the Korean economy, Seoul's Finance Minister Hyun Suk gave assurances that it will have a limited effect given the country's stable fundamentals. Speaking in a meeting of economy-related ministers on Thursday, Hyun also said the markets have already adjusted to the prospect of a stimulus rollback, removing most of the remaining uncertainties surrounding the decision. He did warn, however, the international capital outflows could increase the level of market volatility in the short run and vowed to respond with a contingency plan to counter any market instability. The temperatures are dropping rapidly here in the nation, and the weather is only expected to get colder as we enter the Christmas weekend. And during this time of the year, energy is always a concern. But rest assured, Koreans are expected to enjoy a stable power supply this winter. No chance of a mass blackout we've seen back in 2011. Our Yudian reports.
Warmer winter weather and a more stable energy supply are going to help Korea keep the lights on this season. Back in 2011, the government had been forced to use a controlled blackout to regulate power consumption. But the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Thursday said the country's power reserves will hover around a safe level of 5 million kilowatts this winter, even when energy usage reaches its peak in the last week of January. That's provided that 3 of the country's 23 nuclear reactors are back up and running again soon, after being shut down back in May for using cables with fake certificates. Officials say the 3 will most likely begin operations again in the second half of next month. But the government did warn that unseasonably cold weather and malfunctioning nuclear reactors could bring about a power shortage. To keep energy usage at a safe level, it said it will offer a special rate cut of 30% on electricity consumed during the least busy hours, while the rate during peak hours may increase to 4 times the normal rate. Companies and shopping districts have also been ordered to keep their thermostats below 18 degrees. Yudian, ARIRANG News.
Let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center for an update. Now, Bo-kyung, we saw snow flurries throughout the day here in Seoul today. How are other regions looking?
Well, Jihan, not much different, but the Chungcheong and Jeollado provinces are getting a lot of snow. Well, taking a look at the current conditions, the nation is at the edge of a high-pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing cloudy skies across the map. Well, with a heavy snowfall watch issued in some regions, there looks to be another round of snow overnight throughout the country. The mountains of Jeju are forecast to get at most 30 centimeters of snow, whereas us here in the central regions should get anywhere between 1 to 5 centimeters. Currently, it's -4 degrees here in Seoul, but the cold, strong winds make it feel like it's -10. So make sure to keep in mind that make sure to bundle up when heading out, and please be careful behind the wheels. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at -8 degrees with a high of 0. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan reach 3 and 8 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, Jeju and Dokdo peak at 6 degrees. Meanwhile, Mount Kumgang tops out at -4. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, and here is the international weather.
And that's our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. I'll be back with more news updates on our primetime news at 10 p.m. Korea time. See you then.